Hello, everyone. My name is Tahit Chappelle, and I'm the Executive Director of the New Jersey Department of State's Cannabis Training Academy. We're the state's no-cost technical assistance program aimed at helping you understand the cannabis licensing application process and gain deeper insight on the cannabis industry inside and outside the Garden State. If you're interested in the cannabis industry, or if you're thinking about pursuing a license in the Garden State of New Jersey, please feel free to learn more about us at CTA.NJ.GOV, and I'm dropping that into the chat. Or you can contact us directly at cta@sos.nj.gov, and we will try to get to your email between the hours of 9 a.m. and 5 p.m. during normal business working hours. So if you are listening or tuning in to this conversation, this is our Legacy to Legal webinar titled Alternatives to Cannabis Licensing, Branding, and White Labeling. We'll be producing these webinars periodically to help those who may identify as legacy operators understand what it takes to transition into a regulated market, with these conversations led by people who actually succeeded in making this transition happen. Not everyone wants to be a cannabis license owner, but what are other ways you can get your product or service into the legal regulated market? Branding, white labeling, and partnerships are all alternative, low barrier entry points for legacy operators to have some sort of presence in the regulated market. We're going to be learning from a long-term cannabis advocate, a cannabis dispensary operator, a bud tender, a brand and marketing specialist, and an overall California cannabis OG, Amber Center, who has successfully launched multiple brands through various avenues. She's done things like pre-rolls. She's launched non-plant touching things like coffee. She started her own incubator program, and she runs an amazing organization called Supernova Women. You're going to learn all about her in just a second. So in a moment, I'm going to call on Amber, our speaker, to come on onto the stage, the virtual stage, and introduce herself. Give her a brief introduction, and then we're going to learn more about Amber's background, go into our questions, and then we'll get to the audience questions as well. So a reminder, if you have any questions, please drop those questions in the Zoom chat or use the Q&A box in your Zoom browser. And we will get to your questions at the very end of this Q&A. So without further ado, let's get Amber on here. And let's get her to introduce herself. All right, Amber, I just invited you. Here we go. Hello, Amber. Can you hear me?
Oh, hello. I can.
Hello. Hey, listen, before we even get you to introduce yourself, I just want to shout you out for wearing green. Go Eagles. You know, the Philadelphia Eagles just won the Super Bowl, so you're wearing my colors today. Thank you. Shout out to the West Coast love to Philly. I'm just saying to all you in the chat who are Philadelphia Eagles fans, go Birds. I just have to, I'm going to be obnoxious this year. I'm sorry. When the San Francisco 49ers maybe win it, when the Oakland Raiders, you know, when somebody from California wins it, we will.
I
So,
know. Right? LA.
so thank you for coming out here. So Amber, let's have you introduce yourself real quick, and then we'll jump right into the questions. Who are you, Amber?
Yeah, for sure. So my name is Amber Center. I guess I would say serial entrepreneur, but I don't really want to, label myself like that. But I like to do things, cool things with my friends. I'm a CEO of MAKR House. We make rolled cannabis flower inhalable products here in California. And also we have a coffee company, so sell coffee and pair that up with cannabis. But also I'm the co-founder and executive director of Supernova Women, and we're a group of women that works to really create opportunities for Black and Brown folks in cannabis.
And as you bring up some things, Amber, I'm going to drop some relevant links. I've just linked to Supernova Women for those that are interested in checking that organization out. And those in the Zoom chat, you also have Amber's website as well, so you can check her out and see all the things that she does. Serial entrepreneur, sure, we don't have to say that. A person who wears many hats and is a leader in many avenues. I can go with that. So let's get into our questions, Amber. You've been a California OG for quite some time. You've been in the OG regulated legacy market for quite some time. Let's start with your origin story. How did you get into the cannabis space as a consumer, as an advocate? And actually, how did you end up in California? Because that's not where you're originally from, correct? Can you tell us your journey a little bit?
Yeah, sure. So let's see. I'm from Chicago, born and raised. Um, I started smoking and consuming cannabis when I was 18. Um, and quickly after that, like became a daily smoker. I suffer from autoimmune conditions, and I noticed that it just made me feel better. I didn't really know any sort of medicinal things about cannabis at the time. I just knew, that I just felt better. So that was what really mattered to me then. Um, and as I got older, I started to become more curious, not just about cannabis, but also why was it illegal if it made me feel so much better. And after that, really, like I really started to become more and more fascinated with the plant, because I started to notice that the higher quality cannabis that I consumed, the better that I felt. And so I'm like, then I became like very super focused on, all right, where can I get better weed from? And turns out good weed's hard to come by. And not only that, it's very expensive. And so I was like, well, I know how to grow some plants. I'm a pretty good gardener, and decided to like try and grow it myself in my little closet. And it turns out I was pretty good at that. And so I started to grow my own weed. And then after that, I just started to do tons of research on not only on just growing my own weed, but also there were a lot of things happening here in California at the time, and just very curious about advocacy. And I started to become more and more involved with talking to advocates here in California, uh, getting advocates together in the South, in Georgia, and Atlanta, and just meeting with people in person. And then I just kind of naturally fell into advocacy, because advocacy and that's all about creating access for people, right? And so creating access, like people are always looking for good quality weed, and then we're also trying to make sure that other people can get good quality weed. And so I just naturally became an advocate through that way. And then after that, I became really ill, and found out that I had lupus. And so after that, I decided to move to California to get access to better cannabis products. And when I got access to those products when I came here, well, actually, I was offered a job here. My background is in branding and marketing, and when one of the advocates that I had met online through just kind of being in touch with advocates here in California, um, he had a cannabis company and edibles company here, and asked me if I would move here and just kind of help elevate cannabis brands in general.
Not a
Which,
bad gig to move for. Edibles, okay.
yeah, it was kind of funny. It's like, because at the time I was doing ad campaigns for like Home Depot, ESPN. I did a bunch of the designs for the Coca-Cola Museum in Atlanta. And so, the advocates out here knew that that was like the kind of stuff I was working on, because I was always posting it on Facebook. And the advocate here, Mickey Martin, he's like, hey, why don't you come to California, and help me build my brand, and just help elevate cannabis branding in general. So I was super excited about that. So I said, okay. And I moved here in February of 2014. And that was the beginning of my California cannabis journey, which I'm still currently on.
Wow, 2014, 11 years ago. Well, that's
Yeah.
incredible. And for those that may not know the history, California first legalized for medicinal use back in 96. It was the first state to kind of break through the prohibition era as a state to legalize for medicinal use. And then the adult use, correct me if I'm wrong, Amber, the adult use Prop 64 came in 20, it was implemented in 2016. Is that
2018.
2018. So there was you were coming in basically at the kind of last parts of Prop 215, SB 420, and then we're going to get into it hearing about Prop 64. So before we get to the second question, because there's just like you just talked about 20, I mean even 10% of your journey, because there's so much to talk about with what you've done already, Amber. But I just want to label something for those that are listening or going to listen to this later. You talked about being a patient or using cannabis and realizing it made you feel better. Didn't even know about the medicinal aspect, but you used it, you liked it, you continued with it. Very thing with me too. I have an autoimmune deficiency disorder. I didn't know much about the medicinal impacts, but I liked the cannabis and I wanted to find better quality, but wow, did it hurt my wallet. You talked about transitional skills. You have been working in brand and brand marketing and advertising, and there was an opportunity for you to transition those skills into the cannabis industry. And then you talked about just connecting with people, educating yourself, getting more information, creating that network both inside and outside of Chicago. And that led to opportunities down the road. Those relationships are so important too. So even while you were growing, you're in your own little, I don't even know, a 2x4 closet. I don't know how big the closet was. That came into play, and that'll come into play a little bit later when we'll talk about that. So, just want to really highlight there's so much there that you said about being a patient, informing yourself, connecting with other people, and those transitional skills that you already had can still be applied to the cannabis industry, and they are going to be to this day. So let's transition a little bit from advocacy and patient to worker and eventually an operator. Can you talk to us about, you got to California, you're bringing your background in marketing and branding. What was it like to work in the actual cannabis industry, the medical marijuana market first? And then, what was that scene like? Set the scene for us when you were a worker.
Yeah. So, I came in. I was never a bud tender. You said I was a bud tender. I was never a bud tender, but I did come in as a marketing and sales director of an edibles company. So that was like my introduction to cannabis. And I had already, I'd done so much research over the years and like made my own edibles and done all this. So I wasn't coming in super green, right? Like I had already had some experience. Um, I was working for this edibles company. It was small. I grew our accounts from 3 to 50 in the course of 6 months. And I was just out there hustling and meeting tons of people, that was really like how thankfully the person I was working for was a huge voice in medical cannabis. He's since passed away, but he made a lot of progress and strides for medical patients here in California, and now, of course, across around the world, like the work that he did here in the Bay Area and in Oakland. And so because of him and my like really drive to just want to be successful, I met tons and tons of people. Just very being real intentional about networking and meeting folks. So I came in just really just trying to meet as many people as possible and be very helpful. And I worked after I was no longer working there. I worked for a consulting firm for a short period of time, learning how to write cannabis applications. Actually did it for Maryland's first round of medical cannabis applications. And there I met a ton of people, but also got gained a really important skill that ended up turning into tons of projects that I've done now. But learning how to write RFPs and things like that was really important, and I did that very early on. And it's also where I met one of my Supernova co-founders. Um, And then after that, I left there, and that was when I became an operator for the first time. I was hired as the chief operations officer for Magnolia, Oakland, which was a dispensary in West Oakland. And there, I got a crazy amount of experience running a dispensary, creating standard operating procedures for the city of Oakland for cannabis on-site consumption lounges, having a staff of 35 plus people, and just running a dispensary in an urban area like Oakland. Like that was intense, and so I did that for a couple of years. I also was able to study the patients and customers and their buying patterns, what was popular on the market, consumer trends, all that kind of stuff. And from there, I felt comfortable enough to start developing my own products. I started developing my own products while I was still at the dispensary and launched a couple of things, and they became successful. So then I decided to leave the dispensary and start making my own products and start my own company, and still doing that today. So
Wow, yeah. So you kind of were thrown into the deep end when you had to work as a as an operator and be at the top
yeah, that
doing
was
everything.
a really intense job. Running a dispensary is no joke, especially in a major metropolitan area like San Francisco Bay Area.
Absolutely.
And but it was an experience that I would never ever trade, because it was awesome. Even though it was a lot of work, it was a great time. We won all kinds of awards while I was there. Yeah, we really had a pretty phenomenal shop.
And Amber, when you moved to California, did you have your like 5, 10 year plan or goal? Like, I want to own a dispensary or I want to own a license. Like, was that already on your mind, or was that just through a series of events and opportunities that came your way that you ended up, being able to become an operator and be at the top? Or did you always have that goal of I'm gonna work in the legal market and I'm gonna own some sort of license for this? What was that like?
uh, Before I moved here, I knew that I wanted to be in cannabis and work in cannabis. As far as legal goes, like we didn't really think that it was going to be legal anytime soon. So legal market, not necessarily, but it was like, I want to be in cannabis. I see what they're doing out there. I really want to be a part of that. I just feel like I would totally fit into all of that. So I knew I wanted to do something. After I started learning how to make edibles really well from plant material that I had left over, I knew that I wanted to be more in branded products, because my background is in branding and marketing, and I knew I just wanted to uh, put brand stuff, you
Right.
know.
Right.
Uh, so yeah, I did kind of have an idea, like I wanted to be part of something. I didn't know that it would necessarily be mine, right? But I knew that I wanted to be a part of uh, helping to really just like build the cannabis industry and bring it to a place of legitimacy.
Right. Right, absolutely. So let's get into the meat and potatoes. You talked about your background being in branding and marketing and advertising. Let's talk about it. So, not everyone wants to be an operator. Not everyone wants to get a license, but they still want to have a presence or be on shelves or be inside a dispensary or work in the cannabis industry. Can you just talk about the basics of what is branding to you? What does that mean when someone says, I want to build a brand, I want to maybe be on shelves? Can we talk about just like the branding 101? What is that? And what should entrepreneurs think about when they're thinking, I want to create a brand or be a brand in the cannabis space?
What is branding to me? I guess applying an identity to your idea of a product, I guess. I always thought of branding, and I always wanted to make things that resonated with not just myself, but people that I identify with, so like queer community, black community, women, things like that. um And so I just wanted to always make, and also like disabled folks, right? Like disabled folks, patients. So I wanted to make products that really resonated with those people. And also not just make the product itself, or at least have control over that, but then also create a brand story behind it that that made sense for them. So yeah, like that's how Disco Jays was born. It's queer joints that are sparkly and
Very good too.
evoke like a party, right? Queer people, and also Landrace Origins. Landrace Origins is my coffee and cannabis brand, and really tells an origin story of not just the cannabis, but also the coffee, and then pair them together through an experience. And so we host these. Not only do we offer coffee and cannabis, like you can buy the coffee, you can also buy the weed, but then we have these events that you can come to and experience both. And we create this whole atmosphere. And
Wow.
we actually won an award for our events, best cannabis event in the Bay Area for 2024. So,
Wow.
like I'm really just trying to be authentic to myself, to my community, to the brand, to our products, and just bring these very authentic things, and fill a need, not doing things just because, like doing things to fill in gaps, and where there's a need. So often our communities are ignored.
Right.
So the products for people, like, yeah.
Authenticity and intentionality, two seems like two pretty big pillars if you're thinking about entering or bringing something to the table when it comes to the cannabis industry. So real talk, I hear, and I'm sure you hear a lot of people who say I just want to get on the shelves. I want to get on the shelves. I just want to have my brand, my product on the shelves. Is getting on the shelves of a dispensary the be all end all when we're talking about transitioning from, let's say, the legacy market to the regulated market? Is being in dispensary the be all end all that everyone should aspire to be? Can you talk about what are some like ancillary products or services that other people can think about that may not always mean, oh, I'm on the shelves, therefore I've won and I'm winning? Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, being on the shelves is hard. There's a lot of expectations, and it gets harder by the day. Like here in California, we're dealing with all kinds of regulatory hurdles and tax problems, and cost issues, and there's just a race to the bottom as far as price, which makes it very unsustainable in most cases to have a model of just trying to be on all the shelves. Um, uh, Also, like, I don't know, we're as old as our market is, people are still trying to figure out the regulatory market, including myself, like, because it is so it's changing a lot. It's constantly changing. We're dealing with an excise tax that's getting ready to go up to 19% in April, which is just really going to wipe out quite a few folks. So people are constantly right now contemplating, like, what are my other options besides being in dispensary shelves, right? And I started asking myself this a long time ago, which is why I started to do all these kind of other ancillary type of things with my coffee and the events. And now I'm actually getting ready to launch an infused hemp beverage. And it's under my Landrace Origins brand, which is a cannabis product that exists. It's a coffee product that exists, and now it's going to also be a hemp beverage that exists. So really, like, I feel like you've got to come at this with not a very narrow focus. Unless you're a dispensary owner, then you're kind of, things are a little different in that type of a license, type of a I guess, endeavor. Like,
Mhm.
and that's a whole other thing I can
That's a whole nother webinar.
talk, yeah, whole other webinar. But if you are like specifically talking about brands and not retail or anything like that, like you got a lot of possibilities. There's a lot of possibilities there as far as like how you can continue to expand your brand and look beyond the retail shelf.
One thing that, pairs sometimes with creating a brand is also the conversation around white labeling, right? Maybe you want to just work and partner and get something there in front of the audience, in front of consumers through white labeling. Can you talk a little bit about what is white labeling? How does it work? Does it work? Is that the path of least resistance if a legacy grower wants to get their weed into the shelves, but doesn't want to get a cultivation license and wants to partner with someone who has a cultivation license and do some white labeling? Can you talk about what white labeling it is and what does that mean?
Yeah, sure. So white labeling is what I do as a brander. Like that's my bread and butter, right? And white labeling is essentially having someone else make the product for you to your specifications on your behalf. So um there's pros and cons to it, like just like anything, right? Like pros to white labeling, it's an asset light approach, right? Like you don't have to have um all a facility, you don't have to have the license and all of that liability, all of those things, but now you're dependent on someone else. You're on their time schedule, not on your own.
Mhm.
There's often extra fees incurred because you're paying someone else to do things, and you're paying somebody else to move your product around the supply chain. And there's definitely pros and cons to it. And also being asset light, there are instances like I buy a lot of equipment. Let's say I've got a specialized product I have to make, and the manufacturer doesn't necessarily have this piece of equipment, and I've got to buy it and give it to them. So there are still expenses and things like that that you could incur as a brand that enters into white label agreements. But also, I've also got like a lot of flexibility, not having all these assets and licenses and things like that. Like the whole coffee thing, like I white label coffee. My cousin is the roaster in Southern California, and I sent him a bunch of packaging and labeling and all that, and he puts the packages together and does all the fulfillment. So and a hemp beverage, same there, right? Like I send my specifications. Like right now, I'm in the formulation process, so the formulator is making the formula. Then I'll take my formula and go to a manufacturer. The manufacturer will have all the packaging. They'll manufacture our beverages and then get them on the shelves. So you're a bit of like an orchestrator when you are the white labeler. Yes, and everything's got to work in concert together, and it can be tricky. You're also very much on the front end of things, so you're handling the marketing and all these types of things. Or you could send that stuff out too, but I wouldn't really recommend that.
Own your brand, own your intentionality.
Yeah.
We're going to get to the next question, but I want to talk about something real quick too. Can you, brand, thinking about a brand, conceptualizing a brand, having authenticity and intentionality behind it. When you have a home run of a product or medicine that you're bringing to market, can you talk a little bit about protecting your brand and your IP? If you're working with all these vendors and you're white labeling, how do you make sure that you're kind of protecting yourself and getting some of that money back and making sure that no one runs away with your idea because your brand is so popular and hot? Can you talk a little bit about protection around that?
I can talk a little bit about it, right? Like, there's an expert here in the
There
building.
is. Yes, there is. People should know. Jessica Gonzalez is in the house.
Um,
We know. But from your perspective, as a person who's launched so many products, and we'll talk
Sure.
about contracts in a second, but talk a little bit about protecting your brand, especially for our legacy growers out there in the audience. You know, you have some fireweed, you want to get that maybe onto shelf, but how do you make sure you're a little bit protected?
Yeah, so as far as like genetics goes, like that's still there's no, you can't trademark a plant, you know? So as far as genetics goes, it's still very old school. Like I'm not giving anybody my cut, I'm not giving anybody my seeds. Like you got to get out of here, like, and that's
VIP
that
only.
for a while. But if we're talking about brands outside of genetics, you know, I mean, the first thing I'm going to do is call an IP attorney and be like, hey, I got this idea. I'm going to do the quick Google search real quick and make sure nobody else is using it in the manner that I want to use it. And then I'm immediately calling or emailing my attorney and saying, hello, I have a brand that I want to protect, you know, and, and, really, yeah, like, you know, I create, you know, the brand. And but I rely heavily on my IP attorney to make sure that it's protected, and all of the use cases and the ways that I want to use it are protected. And really, you got to stay up on these IP laws because they're changing and they're weird for cannabis. They're not like all other products. Thankfully, because I make other products, I've been able to get stuff like, you know, my coffee and things like that protected. But the cannabis is still very dicey and very strange, you know.
Mhm,
Uh,
mhm.
and they just changed them up because a lot of folks were saying, "Oh, I can just go and get this protected as hemp, my cannabis products." But now they're like, no, you can't. This is weed," you know. So
They
this
got a lab somewhere testing it too, right?
stuff is changing. Yeah, yeah. Now, state laws are also different than federal laws. Like you've got state IP licenses, and then you got federal IP licenses, and it's all very it's a lot. So my suggestion would be if you have an idea that you would like to protect, you gotta pick up the phone, you gotta call your IP attorney.
Excellent. And we're going to talk about partnerships and building your team and all that stuff in a second. So let's talk a little bit. I want to use your coffee as a case study. Can we talk a little bit about, can we talk a little bit about start to finish in the sense of how did you go from this concept of this coffee brand, this coffee product, and then how did you go from concept to reality and getting it to market? Can you talk a little bit about that process of I had this idea and then X amount then I did all these things and it kind of turned this way. Can we talk a little bit about that? And how did you navigate something like that?
Yeah, so I started thinking about the relationship between coffee and cannabis, well, wake and bake, and coffee and cannabis, how popular it was and how nobody really owned it. And I was like, oh, you know, I think that would be really cool to have some sort of a brand that just revolved around the wake and bake. And so I have a cousin that's a roaster. He has a roastery down in LA. And I approached him and was like, hey, you know, I'm thinking about starting this brand, and I need a bunch of coffee. And so, but I want to have my own kinds of coffee and my own relationships with farmers. And I want to seek out certain farmers so that I could tell a story, because a lot of the branding in this an idea is around the origin story.
Mhm.
And so talked with my cousin for a while, found some uh, women-owned coffee farms that I wanted to work with, small family-owned coffee farms, and identified those. And then I said, okay, now I want to pair this with cannabis, and I want to find these unique cannabis cultivars and pair them with the coffee. And so I started to talk to different cultivators and find unique cultivars, and oh, you know, maybe this type of feeling will go great with this type of coffee, this type of flavor, go with it good with this coffee, and just started pairing up the two. And that's really how it came up with this whole concept of coffee and cannabis. And it was really mostly about the story as well as creating an experience, because anybody can just light up uh, a joint and make a cup of coffee, right? But it's got to be special. So on our branding, like on our packaging, we tell you what type of feeling you should expect from this coffee or the cannabis, what the flavor profiles are of both of these things, how they will make you feel when you consume them both together. And then we host these events also where we're educating folks on those very same things. Hey, here are the tasting notes, here are the notes you should expect, here is this globe of cannabis, you can smell this, we introduce things to people the proper way. Like, sure, you can sit at home and roll it up, but when you're presented in this with like a globe of cannabis and it gets wafted face, right? And we've rolled it for you, and we've prepared a pour over of coffee for you, and done everything how it's supposed to, like it. And it's like we've also created this ambiance, right? Like, we got a lot of people around chilling, we got music, it's a beautiful space, we got food, yeah, it's very much an experience. So the brand is really all about creating an experience and telling an origin story, and I think that comes through a lot.
There's there's a vast difference, y'all, in smoking a pre-roll full of shake and leftovers and drinking your Folgers cup, and smoking some Disco J's and drinking some Landrace Origins. I'm sure there's a massive difference in that quality and that story and that intentionality. You were so intentional in every single aspect of it. I sometimes feel like people think about cool like brand names and buzzwords, but they don't think about what does that actually mean to people? How does that resonate with people? And how do I educate people about why it's named like this? What's the origin story and what's the importance behind it? So it sounds like through every single step of the way, you're intentional and thoughtful and meticulous about how you're presenting your brand, presenting your story, and making sure that people really had a long-lasting impression and impact based off of that experience. Is that something accurate I could say?
Absolutely. I mean, you've got to go in with a very clear a clear idea, vision, story of your brand, because then you have to convey it to a very wide audience, right?
Right.
And yeah. So coming in, really knowing what your brand is and who you're speaking to and what you're talking about is critical.
Right.
Otherwise, it's going to get all muddied up, and it's just not going to be differentiated amongst the crowd of other brands that you're competing against.
Absolutely. So we talked about white labeling, working with other people to get your product and your concept to the customers in reality. And as I mentioned, it takes a village, it takes partnerships, it takes lessons learned, either good lessons, hard lessons, great lessons, sad lessons to navigate the cannabis industry and get
Lots of
into
hard lessons.
lots of hard lessons. So can you talk about what are some examples of how do you find the right partners? And not just the right partners to work with you, but the right investors, the supporters, people who are going to rock with your brand and your concept and your identity around this product and help you bring it to life. So talk about partners. Let's start with finding the right partners, because we know a lot of legacy operators have an amazing story. A lot of legacy operators have already pre-existing good brands, but if they're trying to possibly transition into the regulated market, they're going to need partners that they may not ever have had to interact with. An IP attorney, some people have never heard of that, and that's okay. But can we talk about how do you find the right partners? What do you do in terms of looking for the right partners? Who do you need? Let's start with that.
Yeah. Okay, so you asked a lot of questions.
I know, I'm sorry. Former journalist here, Amber, I'm sorry. There's just too much good stuff here.
Finding the right partners, operational partners. Start there. as far as like supply chain partners, things like that. That's a really good question. I mean, I really just turn to my colleagues in the industry and find out who they're working with, what the experience was like. Then you're going to want to get out and meet these people, go to their facilities, check their facilities out, make sure they're vetted, ask a lot of people what their experiences have been like. That's really like the best way is, and then, yeah, those two things, right? Talking to folks and then going and actually seeing in person, talking to these people, asking them questions, just being engaged. I met a lot of my partners because I've been in the industry for so long. So, and yeah, just really following those things, talking to my network, and then going and being present.
Are there certain things that you use when you're meeting people initially that you use as like a vetting process or as like a check to be like, if they say something, then that's a red flag, or if I ask them this and they act this way, it's a red flag, or is it kind of situational organic?
I don't know. It's like when I meet somebody, my brain is working in overtime, asking things, 10,000 questions that I'm not even conscious of. You know what I mean? Virgo here, Virgo.
Hey, me too. Hey.
No, but seriously, like I feel like I just go through this whole thing and I'm probably not even conscious of it. It's just body language, everything. You know what I mean? But really, like it's some common sense things, right? Like you go to their facility, you're gonna want to make sure it's very clean. You're gonna want to make sure things are organized. You're gonna want to make sure that they're following processes. You just common sense things, and then also you're gonna want to make sure the communication is good between you and the operator, and that you have open communication. And then you're going to want to check and see what their experiences have been like with others that within your network. Maybe it's your friends, maybe your colleagues, whatever. So kind of common sense things.
Good vetting, yes. And
Yeah, and then you're going to want to make sure that they're also good at making the products that you need to make them to make. You don't want to go to somebody that makes nothing but joints and say, "Hey, I want you to make my gummies." Like or even somebody that's kind of okay at making gummies, but they're excellent at making joints. Like find the person that's excellent at making gummies, because 9 times out of 10, they're probably going to be able to do it for you more efficiently, faster, more accurately, and probably at a better price. So, but there's pros and cons to that too, right? Like you also don't want to be working with a bajillion people because that's a whole lot of orchestrating that you have to do. And so, yeah, just weighing your pros and your cons and what makes sense for you and your situation.
And I just want to be conscious to everyone's time. We have about 10 minutes left of this, and I have so many more questions, but I want to be respectful for your time. This is a call out to the audience. If there are questions that you have, I'm gonna ask Amber one last question. It's gonna be a 2 question into one. But if you have questions for Amber as well, please drop your questions in the Q&A box or in the Zoom chat, and we will get to them at the very end. The last question, it's a 2 for Amber for you. Knowing what you know now about launching all your portfolio of brands. And I'm glad that you brought that up. Don't just, if you're thinking about entering, it may not be beneficial to be so narrow and go just one way. Think about different types of things that you can bring to the table too. Knowing that you know what you know now, what would you have done differently when you've launched other brands, either the coffee or Disco J's or working on other things? Like, what would you have done differently? And on top of what you would have done differently, can you sprinkle that with some advice for entrepreneurs who are thinking about also going into this journey from going from legacy to the regulated market?
Yeah. So I had said earlier, like, don't go into things so narrow minded, but you kind of got to go into things a little narrow minded. Have some focus. And I wish I would have had more focus on certain things. Mm. And it's always a game, right? Like I feel like I'm constantly, I mean, as an entrepreneur, you're constantly rolling the dice, and being in cannabis, you are always rolling dice, you know. So, it's like, oh, what strains do I launch with? All of this is like you can do as much research and data and all the pulling data and all of this you want, but there's no guarantees. So, I would say also don't be such a perfectionist. Really, that's dial it back. That's where I would land. It's like I was a bit too much of a perfectionist on some things, and you just can't be a perfectionist. And that's something that I've learned over time is that sometimes you just gotta pull the trigger and do it.
Good advice. Sound wisdom from an OG from the future, the West Coast. It's been around for a very long time. And Amber, we really appreciate your time. So we're going to get to the last questions from our audience. One of them, it deals with a little bit about, investing. So we'll talk a little bit about this. So someone asked, there are a lot of dispensaries popping up in this person's town. They'd like to know what's the best way to become an investor in one of the already established businesses? Would it be smart to have a cannabis license before speaking with the owners? Amber, have you done any investing before? What's been your relationship with investors? And is there a way that people can think about if they want to put money into somebody's pocket or put money into somebody's business, so to speak?
Yeah, so I've never invested. I've been always been the one taking on investment.
Give me the money.
Yeah, yeah. And you're definitely going to want to invest in someone. If you're talking about investing in dispensaries and things like that, you're going to want to make sure that they're licensed, because there's no excuse to not be these days, at least when you're talking about retail storefronts. And yeah, you're going to want to make sure that the dispensary is making money. Uh, Here in California, yeah, there's some parameters around like how to tell even if a dispensary is making money, and usually need multiple storefronts out here in order to streamline the administrative part of running the business. Sure, it's different in New Jersey because you guys have much easier tax laws than we do, so it costs less to operate.
Still costs a pretty penny, maybe an arm, but
Yeah,
not an arm and a leg in your firstborn like California. So,
yeah, yeah. So, I mean, it's just like you just gotta, being a good investor is like knowing how to vet your business opportunity, and that's just really knowing what you're investing in and knowing the market. So, you kind of got to become a bit savvy in cannabis, and if you're wanting to invest in dispensaries, and you got to know a lot about retail and the trends, and not only what's happening now, but also what looking to the future. Like, let's be honest here, we know that people like to buy stuff online. Like, how sustainable is it going to be to for these retail dispensaries and shops to continue popping up? So yeah, just being a good investor is really about knowing what's happened in the past, knowing where we're at now, and being able to look forward in the future.
Absolutely. And there are critical themes that you're talking about here that you've consistently talked about is educate yourself, inform yourself, reach out to the people who are doing the things that you want to do and learn from them, partner with them, bring intentionality. Don't just try to, pick a person's brain for no reason. Like, be intentional about these relationships and learn from people before you decide to jump in. Because if you're not a student of the game and you're constantly educating yourself, then you're bound to possibly be out of this too. You always got to continuously learn. I'm sure you feel the same way, Amber, especially with regulations and laws constantly changing. Even when you're in the thick of it, things are changing always at the drop of a dime too.
Absolutely, yeah. And I will say one of the things that I really attribute a lot of my success to is the ability to build and maintain relationships. Like, that was it's always been the first thing that I really kind of lead with, and it's incredibly important. It's
Absolutely.
your relationships, they're everything.
Absolutely. Someone in the audience had, what's the best way to connect with you? And that'll be my last answer or last question for you, Amber. What is the best way for people to connect with you if they would like to reach out to you? I don't know if you offer any consulting services. Hey, listen, if people want to, work with Amber, make sure that you know that she also deserves some support as well. But what's the best way for people to reach out to you if they have the deeper, more professional questions?
It's really, I'm gonna be honest, like I'm pretty busy, so it's very hard for me to answer individual questions and things like that. Um, I'm doing a, I'm trying to do a lot more webinars and things like that and be a bit more engaged in this way. So you'll see a ramp up of that over the next several months. You can follow me on social media. You can follow Supernova on social media. Um, and yeah, you can visit my website. Feel free to send me a message. I will try to respond, but I cannot guarantee that I will. Asking me very specific questions, you'll more likely get an answer than asking me something broad.
That's a good way to put it. And I put your LinkedIn, your professional LinkedIn link in the Zoom chat, and I put Supernova Women too because you're super. We didn't even get to talk about Supernova Women. I know that's a whole
And
webinar in of itself.
that's okay. I
But
was here to talk about legacy to legal, you know?
also, yeah. But for the audience or for the listeners too, you want to talk about a powerhouse full of amazing organizers who do a lot of work to help people understand the business, understand the advocacy, understand the importance of things like equity, inclusion, access. Supernova Women is one of the great groups, especially based out of California, but has different members everywhere across the country.
Shout out to Jess Gonzalez,
Shout
board
out to
member
Jess.
supreme.
There you go. There are that's a great group of people. It's like Voltron. Amber's the head. It's like, but it's Voltron though. So there's, if you look to Supernova Women, you'll definitely be able to connect with other amazing champions just like Amber too. So Amber, thank you so much again for your time. I really appreciate it. This was a packed audience. A lot of great engagement in the Zoom chat. A lot of thank yous in the Zoom chat for your time and patience and your wisdom. So truly appreciate your time as always. For everybody watching, if you want to tune back in and rewatch this, we are going to put this on the CTA portal. You can come back to this webinar and watch it. We'll also have it on our digital page, the CTA.NJ.GOV digital page as well. So you can watch it on YouTube and share it around as well. We'll also be sharing this on social media as well. And Amber will send you the link too, so you can share it to your network. So if you ever want to rewatch and reconnect, feel free to rewatch this again. And with that being said, thank you so much for joining our Legacy to Legal webinar series. We will be continuing this again, and we'll continue to bring on amazing people like Amber to drop some wisdom and make sure that you're making the best business decision for yourself. And with that being said, class is dismissed. Thank you so much, everybody.